The desert wind, ancient and unyielding, whispered tales of forgotten empires across the cracked earth. It stirred the sand, not into dunes, but into colossal, geometric peaks of polished durasteel and shimmering glass, reaching for a sky that pulsed with an electric, artificial glow. Below, a world of ceaseless industry churned, a grand symphony of a million bound lives, their toil echoing in the rhythmic clang of construction and the hum of unseen energies. This was not the Egypt of our history books, nor the future imagined in our wildest dreams. This was something far grander, far more terrifying, the age of Pharaoh Aethelred, the visionary, a man who dared to rewrite destiny itself. His reign was a testament to absolute power, an unyielding will, and a dream so vast it consumed everything in its path. A dream that, perhaps, humanity was never meant to fully grasp. Before the ascendant spire pierced the heavens, before the Sky-Chariots became vessels of pilgrimage, the land lay fractured. Cities huddled beneath choking smog, remnants of a forgotten industrial age, while sprawling wastes festered with discarded dreams. It was a world hungry for direction, yearning for a purpose beyond mere survival. Into this desolate canvas stepped Aethelred, a figure whose gaze seemed to pierce not just the present, but the fabric of time itself. He spoke not of gods, but of algorithms, not of the afterlife, but of a multi-planetary future. His initial pronouncements were met with a mixture of awe and derision. To make humanity a multi-world species, he declared, his voice resonating through crude public address systems across the crumbling megacities. To unlock the cosmic gateway, to transcend this singular, fragile cradle. His early endeavors were audacious, borderline insane. He commanded the construction of colossal energy conduits across barren plains, harnessing the sun's fury with an efficiency previously deemed impossible. He drained vast poisoned lakes, replacing them with intricate hydroponic farms that glowed with unnatural vitality. Yet the people, weary and cynical, saw only labor, only more struggle. His initial factories of tomorrow, turning out sleek, self-propelled conveyances, were viewed as mere novelties for the privileged few, not the foundation of a new civilization. The established councils, remnants of an old world order, scoffed at his celestial ambitions, fearing the radical upheaval he promised. They clung to their dwindling resources, their petty squabbles, their comfortable mediocrity. Aethelred, however, was not a man swayed by skepticism. His eyes, burning with an almost messianic fervor, saw only the path forward, and those who stood in it were merely obstacles to be bypassed or, if necessary, removed. His struggle was not just against the elements or outdated technologies, but against the ingrained inertia of human nature itself, against the fear of a future too bright, too challenging, too immense to comprehend. He knew, with an unwavering certainty, that humanity deserved more than its limited horizons, and he would drag it, screaming if necessary, into the dawn of a new age. The turning point arrived not with a thunderous declaration, but with a silent, devastating discovery. Within the ancient, forgotten data vaults of a fallen civilization, Aethelred's brightest scholars unearthed fragments of a technology beyond their current understanding, a means to manipulate the very biological code of life itself, not for fleeting health, but for profound, systemic compliance. It was a whispered secret, a dark key to absolute control. His closest advisor, a cunning orator named Kaelen, saw the potential for limitless power, for a true societal restructuring. Kaelen, who had initially championed Aethelred's vision, now harbored a secret ambition, envisioning himself as the true power behind the throne. He subtly guided the research, pushed for its application, believing he could wield this ultimate tool for his own ends, controlling Aethelred himself through the very systems he helped implement. But Kaelen underestimated the pharaoh's singular focus, his unyielding will. Aethelred was no puppet. When the full implications of the discovery were laid bare, Kaelen moved. He assembled a cabal, planning to seize control of the nascent Aethelredian code and redirect its power to install himself as the true sovereign. He saw Aethelred as near a visionary, a dreamer, unfit to wield such brutal power. The betrayal was swift, but Aethelred's countermove was swifter, colder, more absolute than any could have imagined. Kaelen's plot was exposed not by spies or informants, but by the very neural networks Aethelred had secretly woven into the emerging infrastructure, systems Kaelen himself had helped design, unaware of their true depth. On the eve of his planned coup, Kaelen found himself isolated, his network of loyalists systematically neutralized. The revelation of his treachery, broadcast across the nascent Omniscreen network, was devastating. Aethelred, appearing before the unified population, his face grim, his voice devoid of emotion, did not condemn Kaelen to death. Instead, he decreed a fate far more chilling. Kaelen and all who had conspired with him would become the first subjects of the binding decree. They would be bound, not by chains, but by a subtle, irreversible modification to their very being, their wills irrevocably redirected to serve the grand projects of the Pharaoh, for life. They would become the living embodiment of his vision, their individuality subsumed into the collective. This was the turning point, the moment the world understood that Aethelred's dream would be built not by employees, but by instruments of his unwavering will, by an entire populace bound to create the future until their final breath. The fear was palpable, a cold tendril gripping every heart. The binding decree plunged the land into a state of profound, terrifying transformation. The bound, as they were now universally known, were not slaves in the traditional sense, but individuals whose very purpose had been redefined. Their personal ambitions, their petty grievances, their fleeting joys and sorrows, all were systematically, subtly, overwritten by an unwavering directive to serve the Pharaoh's grand vision. Their former homes, their families, their dreams, all became secondary to the colossal projects that now defined their existence. The gleaming energy conduits stretched further, now serviced by silent, indefatigable cadres of bound workers. The hydroponic farms, once a marvel, became vast, regimented landscapes of engineered abundance, tended by those whose facial expressions were perpetually neutral, their movements precise, tireless. The Tesla works, once mere factories, now monstrous, sprawling complexes of self-replicating machinery and human hands, became the pulsating heart of this new civilization. Here, the raw materials of the planet were fed into automated processing arrays, then sculpted by the bound into intricate components for the Sky-Chariots, the colossal vessels that would carry humanity to the stars. The cacophony of metal on metal, the hiss of hydraulic presses, the rhythmic thud of automated assemblers, all were underpinned by the quiet, ceaseless industry of thousands upon thousands of bound workers, their movements synchronized, efficient, devoid of complaint. They worked without rest, without complaint, fueled by nutrient paste and the single overriding directive ingrained in their very cells. Their families, if they had any, were housed in sterile, modular dormitories adjacent to the works, their children raised within the pervasive influence of the Pharaoh systems, destined to inherit the same dutiful purpose. Education became indoctrination, entertainment, a reinforcing loop of Pharaoh Aethelred's boundless wisdom and the glorious future he was building. Dissent, of course, was whispered in the deepest shadows. In the few places the omnipresent net sight couldn't fully penetrate, but it was fleeting, quickly extinguished. The thought enforcers, an elite guard directly answering to the Pharaoh, moved through the populace with silent efficiency, their eyes scanning for the slightest deviation in behavior, the merest flicker of independent thought. Those found harboring rebellious sentiments were swiftly brought before specialized tribunals, their minds recalibrated, their bodies reinforced, and then returned to the deepest, most demanding sectors of the colossal construction projects, their wills broken beyond repair. Even beyond direct enforcement, the psychological grip was immense. The very air hummed with the inevitability of the pharaoh's vision. The constant, repetitive broadcasts on every omniscreen, the ubiquitous presence of the colossal structures, the sheer scale of the achievements unfolding daily, all combined to create an overwhelming sense of Pharaoh Aethelred's absolute, godlike authority. Hope, for most, became synonymous with the pharaoh's will, and any personal desire that deviated from that became a terrifying, dangerous anomaly. The Sky-Chariot launches were no longer mere engineering feats. They evolved into grand, meticulously choreographed religious ceremonies, televised globally on the omnipresent net site. Thousands, millions even, would gather in colossal amphitheaters carved from reclaimed slag heaps, their faces upturned, bathed in the blinding light of the immense launch plume. The air would crackle with manufactured reverence as the towering vessels, gleaming like jewels against the twilight sky, ascended with a roar that shook the very ground. The priests of the outer reach, robed figures trained in advanced propulsion mechanics and orbital dynamics, would chant ancient-sounding incantations, praising the pharaoh's genius and the boundless destiny of humanity among the stars. These were not prayers to deities, but to technology, to progress, and to the absolute will of Pharaoh Aethelred. Each successful launch was hailed as a divine affirmation, a step closer to the promised salvation on distant worlds. Each failure, rare but devastating, was immediately contained, erased from public memory, and its cause swiftly rectified by the tireless, unyielding Bound. The colossal projects continued, each more ambitious than the last. Below ground, vast tunnel networks were excavated, designed to house humanity's burgeoning population in climate-controlled environments, safe from the increasingly volatile surface weather patterns. Above, a ring of orbital stations began to encircle the planet, a glittering crown of industry and surveillance. The true cost of this rapid expansion, however, was immense, and it was borne almost entirely by the land itself. Ancient forests, replanted by early Aethelredian efforts, were clear-cut again for construction materials. Mineral wealth was stripped from the planet's crust with unprecedented speed, leaving behind scarred, desolate landscapes. The delicate balance of the planet's ecosystems began to buckle under the strain of perpetual extraction and transformation. Even the air, purified for the core cities, carried the faint, acrid scent of a world being remade, violently, relentlessly. Pharaoh Aethelred, however, saw not destruction, but necessary metamorphosis. To him, the earth was merely a stepping stone, a cradle to be outgrown, and its suffering a temporary affliction for a far greater cosmic glory. He had an empire to build, a species to save, and no sacrifice, natural or human, was too great for that ultimate, singular goal. The political machinations of the past were replaced by a cold, efficient bureaucracy, entirely focused on serving the pharaoh's directives. Advisors were selected not for their independent thought, but for their ability to execute his commands with precision and unwavering loyalty. The concept of personal ambition beyond serving the pharaoh was eradicated. Any deviation, any whisper of a separate agenda was instantly flagged by the all-encompassing net site and swiftly dealt with. Children were born into a world where their future was predefined, their paths laid out before them by the omniscient systems of the pharaoh. Their dreams were his dreams, their aspirations his grand designs. The individuality that once defined humanity slowly, inexorably faded into the seamless tapestry of the Aethelredian Empire. The fear was not of punishment, but of meaninglessness, of becoming an anomaly in a perfectly ordered, perfectly controlled world. Then came the grandest project of all, the culmination of Pharaoh Aethelred's life's work, the ultimate demonstration of his absolute power and the final, terrifying realization of his vision, the Great Exodus Fleet. For decades, resources had been funneled into its construction, an armada of gargantuan world ships, each capable of carrying millions, designed to traverse the void between stars and establish new colonies on distant worlds. These were not mere vessels. They were self-contained biomes, miniature planets capable of sustaining life for generations. Their construction was a feat of engineering so immense, so audacious, it defied imagination. The entire planet had been transformed into a single, vast shipyard. The last remaining wild spaces were paved over, the final reserves of rare elements mined clean. The very atmosphere hummed with the energy required to power the fabrication arrays. The climax arrived on the day of ascension, a date etched forever into the consciousness of the empire. Billions gathered not in amphitheaters, but in vast, sprawling plains cleared specifically for this spectacle, their eyes fixed on the horizon where the first of the world ships stood, a colossal mountain of durasteel and light. Pharaoh Aethelred, a stoic figure clad in robes woven with embedded luminescence, stood upon the great viewing platform, his gaze fixed on the vessel. His voice, amplified to encompass the entire planet, resonated with an almost unbearable gravitas. Humanity's cradle has served its purpose. Our destiny awaits beyond this sphere, among the stars. With a command, the vast anti-gravity engines of the first world ship ignited. The ground trembled violently. The sky screamed as an impossibly bright pillar of pure energy erupted, propelling the colossal vessel upwards, slowly at first, then with accelerating grace.
But as the first world ship cleared the atmosphere, an unforeseen, horrifying anomaly occurred. The immense energy required for its launch, combined with the generations of relentless planetary exploitation, ripped a catastrophic fissure in the very fabric of the planet's magnetosphere. A blinding, searing pulse of raw solar radiation, unimpeded, swept across the surface. The protective shields of the cities flickered, then failed. The omnipresent net sight, the lifeblood of the empire, went dark, plunging the world into sudden, terrifying silence. Billions of bound, their wills abruptly unmoored from the collective directive, looked up with an expression of confusion, then terror, as the sky ignited with lethal, silent fire. Pharaoh Aethelred, still on his platform, watched the destruction unfold below, his face impassive, an almost imperceptible tremor in his hand. He had achieved his exodus, but at what an unimaginable, unforeseen cost. The very world he sought to transcend, the world that had labored ceaselessly for his vision, was immolated in the wake of his triumph. The future, for those left behind, was a sudden, agonizing silence. The age of Pharaoh Aethelred, the visionary, ended not with a whimper, but with a roar that tore a hole through the heavens and left a planet scarred and silent. The world ships, having escaped the conflagration, sailed on into the cold, silent void, carrying a fragment of humanity, bound by decree, into an uncertain stellar future. What kind of future, one wonders, can truly be built upon the ashes of its past, upon the extinguished individuality of billions, upon the sacrifice of an entire world? Was the price of ultimate vision truly worth the total devastation? History, ancient and terrifying, whispers its chilling lesson. Absolute power, even in the service of the grandest dreams, often exacts a toll far greater than any prophet, any pharaoh could ever truly comprehend. And in that terrifying silence, the echoes of 1,000,000 bound lives linger, a haunting testament to the dreams we build and the fears they ultimately awaken.
Don't forget to subscribe to Hidden History of Human Race for more untold stories from the past.